We took a field trip in middle school to a salt marsh in our town. It was for our science class to study marine life or something like that. I don't even remember. All I remember is we were in teams of 2, and our assignment was to take notes of certain things we could see through our binoculars. I was paired with my best friend Jordan. He and I were lagging behind the group because we wanted to sneak off and do our own thing. So when our teacher, Miss Stern, and the 2 other teachers on the trip with us were far enough away, we turned around on the path and went a different way. The whole salt marsh was just a large maze of wooden walkways built over the swampy waters. The trip was so mind-numbingly boring to us at our young age that we couldn't stand the assignment anymore. We went off to explore down the alternate walkway that we weren't supposed to go down. It had a big sign posted up saying something like, "Don't go down this way unless you work for the town." So guess what we did? Of course we went down this way. There was a lot of super tall grass everywhere, so we were well hidden from the teachers or the rest of the students. We walked for a while till we passed this little shed-sized building that said "Do not enter" on the door. We tried the door handle, but it was locked, so we proceeded onward. The more we walked and the more turns we made, the more we realized this place was absolutely ginormous and a literal maze. There came a time where we agreed it was time to head back to the group, because we weren't having much more fun ourselves than we would be with the group. Plus, it was getting late and we'd been gone for a while, and we didn't want to get caught, so we started going back in what we thought was the right direction. But after apparently wrong turn after wrong turn, we admitted to each other that we were lost. Any sense of direction now was completely gone, and the sun was clearly starting to go down. Panic didn't set in just yet, but we were definitely worried. Time dragged on, and we couldn't find the damn path back to where we came from. We tried finding that little building that we had just passed as a sign that we were going in the right direction, but we couldn't. The tall, swampy marsh grass was taller than us and blocked sight of everything. The sun was now setting, and there was no way our class and teachers were still here. This was before cell phones were a big thing, let alone among middle schoolers. We had no way of calling for help, but we refrained from screaming until the sun was practically all the way down and panic now started to set in. Suddenly it seemed we weren't alone. Jordan and I started to hear the splashing of water nearby, exactly the sound of someone walking through the probably knee-high water. We started to walk faster down the wooden pathway, and when we stopped again to listen, the splashing was still there, getting louder and closer. We didn't have flashlights, only the moon to light the way. We knew we weren't alone. Something or someone was in the tall grass, hiding, somehow watching us. Jordan basically had a "fuck it" moment and went to the grass where the splashing was coming from, pushed a bunch of the giant pieces to the side, and then screamed like a little girl. I didn't see what he saw, and I didn't need to. I ran right behind him down the pathway until we both had to stop to catch our breaths. He saw a person hiding in the grass, though I already figured that before he even told me. We kept running and then stopping to catch our breaths until the sound of a helicopter overhead came closer. We saw it, flying over with a searchlight on. We started waving our hands in the air, and whether that helped or not, I don't know, but eventually the spotlight landed on us and stayed there. We expected the helicopter to lower and pick us up because we were idiot little kids, so when it just hovered there, we were confused. But what they were doing was showing where we were to the police search team that came looking for us, after our parents reported to the school that we never came home. We were eventually found by a bunch of police officers and led back to safety. We told them there was someone hiding in the marsh, stalking us, of course. Apparently Miss Stern either miscounted on the bus back to school, or she simply didn't do a head count at all, and the buses left without us. Either way, she messed up big time, and I'm surprised she wasn't fired. This was easily hands down the scariest night of my life, and it happened when I was so young, too. In senior year of high school, we took an end-of-year field trip to Boston for our U.S. history class. Part of our assignment was following the Freedom Trail and viewing historical sites like the Bunker Hill Monument. There were of course some teachers and volunteer chaperones on the trip, but between me and my 2 friends Sean and Matt, we were all 18, so we easily convinced one of the more chill teachers to just let us go off and do our own thing. So we strayed off into the city, just messed around having fun checking out the place. We checked out Boston Harbor, where we got food at some waterfront restaurant. Then we checked out the Quincy Market and some other historical landmarks, and then finally we ended up at this little cemetery called the Granary Burying Ground. This is where the horror to this story began. There were of course a few other people in this little cemetery besides the 3 of us. We weren't exactly that interested in it. We were just walking through it because it was basically one of the major things on the checklist of places that we were supposed to see. Anyway, there was this one guy who caught my attention. He was wearing this old-looking trench coat and a small top hat. It was definitely too warm out to be wearing a trench coat, I know that. He had a gray mustache too, but that's about all I really remember of his appearance. The reason I picked up on him was because he was looking right at me, just standing still. He wasn't walking along looking at the gravestones like everyone else. I said to my friends in a slight murmur, "Why is this guy looking at me?" as I walked past them, making sure they followed me out of there. As we got back to the street, I told them more loudly that I was being eyed down by some weird-looking old dude. Neither of them took notice, but I didn't want to go back to point the guy out, so we kept walking. We were supposed to meet everyone on the trip at the Quincy Market at 5, so we started making our way back there. A few minutes into our walk, I turned around for whatever reason to look behind me, and there he was again. That old man in the top hat not too far behind me. I noticed him through the crowd. He had on his same neutral, almost unhappy-looking face, his gray mustache covering most of his lips. And yes, it seemed like he was looking at me again. He wasn't even moving. I turned back to face forward and didn't see anything. If it happened again, I'd know something was up. And it did. At the Quincy Market, when we were about to meet with the rest of the group, I saw that man again, far away by a street corner, facing me. He almost blended in with the crowd if it weren't for his top hat. I ran up to Sean and Matt and pressed their shoulders to get them to turn around and look. I pointed at the corner that the man was at not even 10 seconds earlier, and he was gone. I told them that that creepy old dude that I mentioned from the burial ground seemed to be following us and kept looking at us, or at me specifically. I have zero clue where he could have went that quickly though. It didn't make sense. That night at the hotel, I was having a nightmare in which I was in my bedroom back at home, and I was hiding under my bed, and I could see feet coming closer to the bed until they stopped at the foot of the bed. And then the man in the top hat looked under the bed at me with his neutral blank expression on his face. I woke up only moments later to a loud thump in the hotel room. I had no idea what it was. I woke up Matt and Sean and the third guy who was in our hotel room, asking if any of them heard that. No one did but me. I still have no clue what that sound was. Years later, I was going through old photo albums with my grandparents around Christmas time, and I stopped on one page where there was a very familiar looking man in one of them. He was wearing a very similar, if not the exact same type of top hat as the man in Boston all those years ago. He also had the same gray mustache and neutral expression on his face. I asked my grandparents who it was, and they told me he was my grandma's father. Now, I'm not saying I saw my grandma's dead dad that day in Boston, but the resemblance was so uncanny that I'm almost positive my mind was playing tricks on me. That whole series of events still freaks me out to this day.